Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have two amazing guests to reintroduce to you now. Brad and Maggie Jones are returning guests on our show. Be sure to check out their first appearance on Boundless Body on episode 391. Brad and Maggie Jones are directors and producers with decades of experience. Maggie is a stage 4 cancer thriver who credits metabolic therapies along with conventional treatment for miraculously prolonging her life, which she now has dedicated to raising awareness of the use of metabolic therapies for cancer. Brad Jones has over 20 years of editing experience and has worked on everything from a Peabody Award-winning documentary to the highest rated shows ever recorded on MTV and CMT, and spent over a decade working at the Sundance Film Festival and Institute. They have both poured their hearts and souls into making the documentary Cancer Evolution, which relates advances in cancer research from the 1920s to the present, as told by the original researchers, their biographers, and contemporaries. The documentary has been debuting all over the nation and features several of our former guests, including Dr. Thomas Seyfried, Travis Christofferson, Martha Tettenborn, and Sam Apple, among others. Brad and Maggie Jones, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, it's so great to be back, to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, Casey.
Absolutely. It's such an honor to see you guys since we released the first episode, which, by the way, as I was looking back on how long it's been, I had to keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through our episodes. 391 for us, that's a long time ago. We recorded last year. Yeah, it's amazing how time flies. It feels like a few months ago.
It's been a little while. It's time to catch up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been cool. In the last few months, I've actually been able to meet you both in person. I've seen you both twice, both in Austin, Texas for KetoCon, and in San Diego. We just got back from the Symposium for Metabolic Health. So it was just amazing to actually meet you guys in person and see the passion you guys have for this work.
Same here.
Yeah, we've been hitting the same conferences. Like, we only hit one other conference this year. So you were at 2 of the 3 that we made it to.
But we're going to continue to stalk you. So we'll be at your Starbucks.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. The feeling is mutual for sure. I love catching up with you guys. We were talking offline about, the success of the film, how it's going, how it's being received. You guys mentioned you've had a lot of success and a lot of reception, but you've also met a lot of kind of, resistance in certain areas. And that resistance was so strong that when we started talking about cancer and the work you guys are doing, our Zoom cut out immediately. I think that must be some of that resistance. The powers that be just do not want this message to get out, and they will do anything to pull out all the stops.
Yeah. Who is monitoring our Zoom feed? That's what I want to know, right?
Exactly.
So it's a little bit of my passion and my hand gesture hitting the power button too, but
yeah.
Exactly. The powers that be.
Should we start with Maggie's story really quick for anybody who doesn't know how we got here?
That sounds fantastic. We told that on the first episode, again, in episode 391, but your story is so powerful. Lots of things have happened since. And so, yes, absolutely. We would love to hear your story.
Oh, thank you. I'll try to keep it a little bit brief for those who have already heard it. But for those who haven't, back the month before I turned 40, no, it was a week before I turned 40, Brad and I took a one-way flight from our home in Los Angeles to Hong Kong. For a job for me, we'd never been to Asia before. We'd certainly never been to Hong Kong before. But I think we were looking for a new adventure. Mm-hmm. And that's where it was exactly 1 month later that I was diagnosed with terminal stage 4 lung cancer that by then had metastasized to my brain, my eye, dozens of tumors around my chest, neck, abdomen. I always joke it wasn't really that adventure we were looking for. And actually the prognosis for lung cancer that spread to the brain is not good. It's the median survival rate is 6 to 8 months, and the 5-year survival rate was less than 1%, which means it rounded to 0.
Wow.
I actually just yesterday read a study updating all those statistics, and I'm so happy to say that now the 5-year survival rate is 4.7%.
Wow.
But this shows some improvement. People are learning more about how to manage their disease, and it's thrilling. And it's special to me because next month will be my 5-year anniversary since being diagnosed.
That's amazing. You're one of the 4%.
Exactly. And honestly, I feel in the best health of my life. You guys will hear I have something called brain radiation necrosis. You'll hear something called aphasia, where I stumble over my words. This is a result of my conventional treatment. It was brain radiation to the 4 tumors in my brain. And even though I took care of the tumors, along with some other treatments we'll be discussing, it also caused this necrosis, this liquefaction of the brain. But
Yeah.
I've been improving so drastically with some of my personal treatments that I'm sure I'm on my way to healing.
That's amazing. And so you mentioned lung cancer as a prognosis. Did you ever kick your smoking habit, or are you still smoking a few packs a day?
It was non-smokers lung cancer. It's as demonstrated, it was a ROS1 positive mutation. And my gosh, these non-smoking cancers are becoming more and more common. It used to be under 10% of lung cancers, and it's much, much more now. In fact, the study I was reading yesterday showed that over half of new lung cancer diagnoses are from people under 65. And you
Wow.
know that a lot of those people were not smokers, much like the over 65s may have been, because they didn't have the information. And so it's really curious to me why this is happening. And one thing we also know is that these non-smoking diagnoses are more prevalent in women, especially my age, in their 30s and 40s. So there's so
Wow.
much more research to be done there.
Yeah.
And any speculation? I know you said you don't understand why, but do you have any speculation why that might be?
I have very strong theories. For me personally, I know it was stress that contributed a lot, which in our modern society we can't avoid. I also wonder if there wasn't something to do with all the seed oils that I was cooking with over an oven without vents. And I'm sure many other women who think they're doing something healthy for their family are inhaling. Just the nature of our toxic environments out here. And for me personally, I did have a wild alcohol enthusiasm that I was happy to find wasn't alcoholism when I decided to quit drinking, but I'm sure it didn't help with my overall health.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
we ate plenty of sugar.
So when you were diagnosed, would you say, obviously you were in Hong Kong, but would you say you were on a fairly standard American diet?
I thought I was doing better. I even had a blog about healthy eating and cooking from home, but it was based on the standard American recommendations of, whole grains, lean meats, non-fat dairy. And that was what was such a change for me with the new diet that we adopted, a little more Paleolithic, whole, like actual whole foods diet. And even something subtle, like we were eating chicken and fish, but it was uh, from a factory, it wasn't the naturally raised organic stuff that we eat now. And so and then of course the alcohol, the cocktails that went with that, a lot of seed oils. It was a very different diet, even though it was what I thought was healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up seed oils. I was going to ask you specifically about that. I think we've got really good evidence that people that take jobs as like fry cooks and they're standing over these like fry vats have a much higher rate of lung cancer than the population. And so it's really interesting. I didn't get to ask you that question before you brought it up yourself. And I think that research is pretty strong that, yeah, these toxic seed oils, they call themselves vegetable oils, not one single drop of them comes from a vegetable, are absolute poison. Whether you ingest them or breathe them, they're terrible, terrible.
And I'd be cooking with canola oil. Brad would come over to turn on the fan, and I'd be like, "What? You don't like the smell of my cooking? I'm so insulted." And here he was trying to save my life.
I was gonna that's sorry, that was funny. I was gonna just say, and even if you don't believe this 100%, changing out your cooking oil is one of the easiest things you can do, right? Just buy next time you're in the store olive oil for fresh use, and then avocado oil or coconut oil for use on the stove.
Your tallow, your ghee,
You could buy
your
beef
butter,
tallow, yeah.
obviously.
Use
anything.
butter more, yeah. There's just it's one of the easiest things that you can do.
So many plant options and also animal options. So it's open for everybody. You could use coconut, which is like 90% saturated fat, really stable under cooking conditions. Like you said, like
Yeah.
a really good one to have for cooking. That's fantastic. Yeah, we've hosted Chris Kenobi on our show a few times. He made a presentation at the Symposium for Metabolic Health. He makes a very compelling and strong argument that the benefits of a low carbohydrate diet are mainly derived by the nature of a low carbohydrate also being low in seed oils. And again, it's a really strong case. And so
Yeah.
it's funny to like bounce around between like low carb is great versus low seed oil. Maybe one is better than the other, but if you do either one, you're probably in the right space.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, it comes down to if you can just cut out the processed food and the sugar, you're most of the way there. But for me, it started as this vilification of sugar, which should be vilified, but thinking everything was about the sugar. And when I discovered about the seed oils, I don't know which is which, but I'm happy to cut them both out of my diet, my life.
Yeah.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
We can go back and forth on which one is worse, but at the end of the day, just get rid of them both.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also that switch from the usually these are unsaturated fats and these seed oils, and you go to a saturated fat, like you were saying with the coconut oil. It's like, yeah, it's like win-win.
Yeah, so much better.
Yeah.
So Maggie, you get your diagnosis and learn that this is a fatal diagnosis. You have a few months. I can speculate on what that's like. I know we're all going to die. I can't go through that experience unless I get a diagnosis like that. What was that like?
At the beginning, it was really hard. It was sad. I think our saddest moment was the Thursday after my diagnosis. We went out to dinner, and I was telling Brad about how I've had more love in my life, and I've lived a better life than most people did, and I can try to be prepared. Deep down, I just wanted to make him proud and make my doctors proud and die well. But thank goodness, the weekend after my diagnosis, he took me away. I started doing some reading. I read my first survivor books, cancer books, and I started to just imagine deep down that maybe I didn't have to die. Maybe I could be one of that less than 1% that makes it. And some of the therapies that I discovered in these books are things like a radical diet change, fasting. Water fasting is something that we love now. There was a lot of internal work that I knew I had to do, de-stressing, because I mentioned that was a big problem for me in the past. And it wasn't 6 months before I realized that cancer became the best thing that ever happened to me. And I know that can be triggering for people going through their own diagnoses right now. And I want to emphasize to everybody that cancer is never your fault. It's not something that you deserve. But for me personally, it was the messenger that Dr. Naisha Winters talks about in her story, letting me know that I wasn't treating my body right and I could have something better. And so when I was faced with these just matter of months to live, I decided that, well, shucks, I'm just going to actually live, because so much of my life I had been just waiting for the next thing, waiting for work to be over so I could hang out with Brad, waiting to retire so I could go travel and have the life I wanted. And so even though I was working then, things didn't technically change that much in my life. There was this shift where I was going to feel my body. I was going to do what I want and just focus on being kind to people and not trying to just achieve, traditional success in my life. And it just made me so happy that it was, I think, that June that I started talking about cancer being the best thing that ever happened to me. And to this day, Brad disagrees strongly. I wouldn't have changed a thing, because it set us on this new path of first being better to ourselves and our bodies and our health, trying to help people through example, never pushing a certain idea of treatment, but just bring hope wherever we possibly can.
I need a little Maggie on my shoulder to just remind me, as I have this tendency to check boxes and get through appointments, and you're just racing to the next thing and the next thing, and then I'll get to relax in the afternoon, and then I'm anxious about the next day and planning stuff, and then you're just always racing through life. So yeah, what a terrible thing to go through, but also a wonderful lesson to learn that you're here now. You should enjoy this moment. I wish more of us could remember that. So yeah, if you could just hang out and tell me that, that'd be great.
And it's so hard in our modern life. And I forget now, washing the dishes, I should savor that and enjoy that. What if I'm not going to have a chance to ever wash dishes again? That's going to suck. So let's enjoy it in the present.
I don't want that little Maggie on my shoulder.
You can do the dishes.
There you go. Perfect. Brad, did you experience a similar thing as you were going through this? Being the caretaker, we talked a little bit about this last time. That's really hard too. What lessons did you learn from the diagnosis?
I guess I didn't go through the sort of the same transformation that in the way that Maggie did, but basically, I supported her, and the things that she was saying that she was going to do were all evidence-based, backed by research papers. They were in books. So it wasn't, that she was going off on, some crazy tangent. So that allowed me to just sort of, wholeheartedly just join her in what she was doing. So I basically just ended up on a ketogenic diet out of support for my spouse. And then I'm really glad I did. I mean, it's worked out fantastic, just for me personally. But I don't know if that really answers your question too much about how much I grew, but it's just been really great, like, being introduced to this other world. We talk about this all the time, where we feel like we've been pulled out of the matrix, right? Where you're just like, wait a minute, how? And that's when Maggie says that I disagree with her about having this happened. My disagreement isn't that we've ended up in a good place, but my disagreement is that why did I, for so long, for almost 50 years, like, was I taught this by society that that all these things are fine and you shouldn't worry about it? Like, you could literally even go to your doctor when you have a cancer diagnosis and they're like, eat Snickers bars, it's fine, right? Like, just that was the part that was troubling to me, is just like, how come we wouldn't have ended up where we are if there had been sort of a more intelligent, preventative way of of getting this information out there.
Yeah, we've learned so much from this. Like, I really began my learning 5 years ago with my diagnosis. I was no evidence of disease. 1 year later, I continued my lifestyle, enhanced it, continued to educate myself. But the things that I'm learning, not just about diet and lifestyle and all of that, but the way that our society processes and accepts information is insane to me now. Like, even just in the last year, realizing that all the assumptions of my life for the last 43 years, that the government's out here to protect me, that science is going to just reveal the truth. I'm starting to realize that things just don't work the way that I thought that they do, and it's shocking.
Pretty common that people learn this lesson and their first reaction is to just get angry. Like, they're just mad that they had assumed all of those things that you mentioned. Like, the government is out to, exactly, like, that we're supposed to be protected and they're going to help us and they're giving us the right recommendations. And it's interesting when somebody says, if somebody were to tell me, like, oh, I got a diagnosis of cancer, so I went to the internet to study this stuff. Who knows where you are going to end up? You might end up on some website that is shipping people to the Amazon forest to lick frogs or something. Like, you never really know, like, what
Yeah.
the good information is. So how do you know you were going the right path? Like, how did you know the research that you were finding was actually evidence based?
For me, it was PubMed, and I was extremely analytical, all into allopathic only medicine. I was not the woo-woo hippie that I've since become. And so if it wasn't in a study that had been peer reviewed, I wasn't going to believe it. And that's great for me that my internet filters just show me PubMed and really good research. But I know a lot of people are going to have a lot of people recommend to me the things that they found on YouTube or Facebook or a less reliable source. And that's where we realize that somebody who has a terminal cancer diagnosis, in any diagnosis, isn't necessarily like me, where they're going to want to wade through tons of journals and research. And that is where Brad had the incredible idea to, at the time, create a documentary, now a docu-series, where we could present this to people in a much easier way, still incredibly evidence-based, cited by, it's not us in these episodes. It's the actual doctors and scientists who did this research. And just being able to sit back and watch it in a visual form, I think it's going to help a lot more people understand it and see it, and not have to resort to their aunt's roommate's Facebook feed.
Yeah. This isn't a docu series that follows Maggie's journey from like through cancer wards. That seems to be kind of what most cancer documentaries are. And when we first started coming up with the idea, we were like, we just decided that that's just so depressing. Even if there is a good outcome at the end, it's like, if you're a cancer patient or a cancer caregiver, to be sort of dragged through that is just, it's not what you want to do. It's not helpful.
Everyone knows cancer sucks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, is that like sort of a shortcut to human emotions? Yes, it is. And from a storyteller perspective, if we're just trying to reach someone on the street that has no connection to this disease, that might be a route we would take. But we're trying to help cancer patients and cancer caregivers. So we decided that just, using Maggie's story as kind of like a launching point, and then telling you, the research that, Dr. Thomas Seyfried and others like him, Adrian Sheck, these amazing scientists and researchers are finding, and it's just hard to find this information.
It is. And you guys are doing a great job getting the word out. And the parts that I've seen of everything that you've done so far have been absolutely wonderful, really well told. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But before we do, I think it would be nice to kind of review what the conventional kind of message around cancer and cancer treatment is, and contrast that to what we know, when we have known for a very long time, about cancer as a metabolic disease.
Yes. So when I was first diagnosed, again, I was full-fledged allopathic medicine only, wanted to do what my doctor said because I knew they had the best science. It was obviously, with my condition, I was inoperable, terminal, incurable, but they did offer me palliative treatments in the brain radiation that has left me brain damaged, and the chemotherapy. And so went with these. It seemed like the right thing. But what Brad and I realized over time was that my oncologist very much seemed to just be following a flow chart. He even forgot what kind of cancer I had at one time. He confused MAPROS1 with an ALK mutation. And he just wasn't invested. And I realized, okay, he thinks I'm going to die in the year. Maybe he doesn't want to get invested. But it became very frustrating. And then even when I started doing my own research in these published journals, I, approached one of my oncologists about the ketogenic diet. And he was like, oh, that's the low fat one, right? Yeah, I should be fine. And so that tells you how much they know about nutrition and things like that. But overall, just not supportive at all. I stopped telling my doctors in Hong Kong what I was doing. These days in Seattle, my doctors also aren't supportive, but I have this full disclosure. I'll tell them what I'm doing. They tell me, no, don't do it. And then I say, well, I'm going to. Yeah. And they haven't said they're not going to treat me. So we had that going for us.
Yeah.
But yes, so standard treatments, following the flow chart, pretty much all you get is surgery, chemo, radiation. Maybe if you're lucky, you can do some immunotherapy, CAR T, something like that. But guys, there's no question we have solved the cancer problem. It's, increasing numbers of deaths every year. We're over 600,000 cancer deaths a year in just the United States. So that's why it shocks me so much that, some doctors aren't even willing to look at other integrative, supportive therapies. And I want to preface this with saying there's no question that doctors go into medicine to help people. Like, nobody's going in there to screw you up. But there's just this, the system that they go into that in a lot of ways ties their hands.
Well, especially cancer doctors, once you have a diagnosis, they have it really is a flow chart. I mean, they really can't vary too much in how they treat you. They really have to, follow these, paths that are given to them by the system which they work in, which are, basically the same. If you're lucky enough to find an oncologist that understands the metabolics, of cancer, then you're very lucky. But what a lot of people do is they sort of keep their traditional oncologist, and then they get a metabolic oncologist on the side. So Maggie uses an oncologist. I'll just give him a quick plug. Charles Meakin Metabolics. He's a great guy, but
great integrative oncologist.
And he understands the metabolism of cancer. And so he can work with you to help lower your blood sugar, which I guess I could get into the metabolic side of cancer.
And the metabolic treatments that can be used on their own, but seem to be most efficient in conjunction with conventional.
I would love to go there with this conversation for sure. I just want to comment real quick. To me, what surprises me is the lack of curiosity. Like, I think it's one thing if the doctor is like, he's been indoctrinated, pun intended, with, low fat diet. These are the recommendations. This is what we're telling people. It's lack of curiosity. Like, why is Maggie still in my calendar? I thought she was going to die after 6 months. Why is this year 3? Why is this year 4? Why wouldn't you want to know? Like, why wouldn't you ask questions? Like, that's the part that's like, it's so confusing to me.
So my primary oncologist here in Seattle, I'm obviously one of his longest lived patients, and I always tell him what I'm doing and like how this helps me. And his response is, it's against my beliefs, but I'm one of 2 of his patients. I don't know many details about the other one, who he just calls my miracle clients. And he doesn't want to know really what I'm doing, just what I force him to understand.
He's not inquisitive at all. Yeah, and we feel like it's really interesting where it's like, I mean, if you had if you didn't have a screwdriver and someone handed you a screwdriver and all of a sudden you could, work much more efficiently, much better, do your job better, it's like I would want to know about, I would want to use that tool. And it's like that just seems so counterintuitive to Maggie and I, where it's like, we feel like we're doing something different and we're being open and honest with her oncologist about this. But yeah, there's no, and she's not the only one. There are a lot of people that we have spoken with who have used metabolic therapies that say the exact same thing. Like, I've tried to tell my oncologist that I'm doing a ketogenic diet. It's benefiting me. And I'm talking about like dozens of people. And they get this sort of pushback or indifference from their doctor, like, well, you're just special, or you're a miracle, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like,
and I'm not special. I'm not a miracle.
I just feel like if that's true, we got a lot of miracles out there.
We've got a lot of miracles. Yeah. In our last conversation, we mentioned Pablo Kelly. We interviewed him a few weeks ago, and same thing. Like, his doctor's telling him he's really lucky. Like, really, you're lucky to get a diagnosis of glioblastoma. You should be gone in 6 months. It's been 10 years almost. And now he's got like 2 young kids and an amazing life. And yeah, it's day to day for him too, but he's made it this long. It's amazing that more people aren't curious about that, or just write it off like that.
For all of us, but Pablo and I have been able to live these great lives. And Pablo's actually going to be at the summit we'll talk about later. So he's doing a live panel if anybody wants to ask him questions.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I was just going to mention that what's amazing, what's really interesting to me is that the gamut of both types of cancer and ages that this seems to be working for. We've talked to like extremely young men and women and extremely old men and women with various different kinds of cancer. I'm not saying that a ketogenic diet was helpful for every single type of cancer, but it is amazing how many it actually is helpful for in the age range, and the, people also from like stage 1 to stage 4, right? It just seems to really be helpful in a lot of different types of cancer and situations, which that's the really amazing part to me.
Super encouraging.
Yeah.
And in defense of oncologists, my neuro-oncologist who works at the same hospital, just treating my brain issues, I asked him, because the research for glioblastoma is so clear on metabolic treatments. And I was like, I know you have mostly, GBM patients. Do you know about this research? And he does. And even though he's not technically allowed to recommend it by the hospital policies, he's very open of it. And even when I, went off to do my yoga teacher training and, my meditation practice, he is so supportive of those things that a traditional oncologist can't do. So that they're out there.
That's great. It just blows my mind that like it's against the hospital rules that he can't like bring it up or whatever. That it just blows my mind. Brad, why don't we talk about what you mentioned earlier about the kind of mechanics of metabolism, cancer metabolism, and why metabolic treatments work?
Sure. Very briefly, like there was this interesting thing that was discovered about cancer cells back in the 1920s, that they will shift from respiration, which is done inside of the mitochondria. Inside of a cell, there's lots of little mitochondria floating around, and they're basically what make the energy that powers the cell. So when you have a cancer cell, though, it sort of shifts and stops making energy inside of the mitochondria, and it starts basically just breaking glucose, splitting it in half basically in the cytoplasm itself, and you get just a little bit of ATP, which is the energy that the cells use. You get about 1/18th, 1/16th. It actually changes. It just depends on what happens. You get a lot less energy. So basically, to be able to generate enough energy through that process, you have to ramp up that. It's called fermentation, right? Or glycolysis. To get that energy to replace the amount of energy you're getting from respiration, you have to just ramp it up like crazy. Well, that means you need more fuel. So what you can see in cancer cells is that they just take in tons of glucose, like 10 times. It's been documented 400 times as much glucose as a normal cell. And one of the ways that we actually use this nowadays is if you get a PET scan, they actually take a glucose. When you get injected before a PET scan, it's kind of like a little radioactive bit of sugar. And so what they do is they shoot that into you. And cancer cells take up this sugar way more than regular cells, to the point where if they just sort of scan you, they can see where your cancer cells are. So the theory that kind of came out of this was that there's just a problem with the way cancer, generates energy. Maybe the mitochondria are damaged. Maybe it's a choice. We're still not sure on that. But this became this metabolic theory of cancer, that cancer is shifting the way it makes energy from one source to another. And one thing to note on that is that as a cancer gets more and more malignant, the shift becomes more and more pronounced. So sort of like an early stage cancer, it might only be doing like 10 or 20% of energy production through this fermentation. But then once you get to a really malignant cancer, it's going to be in the like 60% range. So it's just really
as much
interesting.
as 70 to 90 in some
Yeah,
cases.
and it can get higher.
Wow.
So, and you see this in about somewhere between like 80 and 90% of late stage cancers have, there's a few that don't do this, but the ones, it's the ones that are killing people that you see it in, right? The ones that metastasize and spread. So the idea is basically that you can lower the fuel, which is the glucose that cancer cells need, by just regulating your diet. And so you can kind of drop down the amount of fuel that the cancer cells have. That does two things. One, cancer cells become sort of voracious. They're looking for every little bit of glucose that they can find. And it's less than there was before. The interesting thing is your regular cells do this too. So they're helping you because they're scooping out all the glucose they want, before it can even get to the cancer cells, which is kind of cool.
That's right. It is.
And then the other thing is that because normal cells will also, in this state of ketosis, they kind of go into like a little bit of a hibernative type state. Cancer cells do not do that. So what happens is that any kind of medication you use, whether it's radiation or chemotherapy, surgery doesn't work in this case, but radiation or chemotherapy, it hurts the cancer cells more because they haven't gone into this hibernative state. So you could do this, it could do two things. One, your normal dosage could kill more cancer cells. That's a great thing. Or the second thing it could do is you could actually take a lower dosage. So if you're like sort of having trouble tolerating like a heavy dose, if you go on a ketogenic diet, you could have a lower dose. So the main thing I would take away, I would say, is that we try and think of it as like Maggie's making her body, or people that go on this diet are trying to make their body inhospitable to cancer, right? You're kind of like getting the soil, taking all the nutrients out of the soil, so it's hard for the cancer cell to grow.
I'm going to add a number 3.
Yeah, please.
The production of ketones that happens when you are in a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet, because ketones are so much more than just another way of fueling your healthy cells. Cancers cannot use them for energy. And they are also, we're learning, act as signaling agents. And we don't know everything about what they're doing, but they're doing something that in studies shows is helpful to cancer patients. And we are not saying in any way that a diet is going to cure cancer, but it can improve outcomes by increasing the efficacy of your conventional medicine, a better quality of life, and improving longevity for some people like me.
Yeah. Our mutual friend, Travis Christofferson, on one of the episodes I did with him, made a really good point. He said, in medicine, there's always a trade-off. Like you can get some benefit with something, but you're always going to have side effects or something that is not wanted, not desirable. It's so rare to find something that has benefits both ways, like you just described. Like lowering the glucose is really good, but it's also really good to increase the ketones. Like you never find something that's like good for both things. And I do want to point out too that the people that are thinking, okay, they've mentioned ketones, they mentioned ketogenic, they must mean the keto diet that I see on magazine covers at the grocery store, which is like all the bacon, all the butter, melted coffee. It's like, no. There are lots and lots and lots of different ways to be ketogenic. You can choose a myriad, whatever strategy you can find. There's so many different ones out there, including things like fasting. You can do this plant-based, you can do this animal-based. There's lots of different ways to do this. It's you need to be in ketosis. It's not about the keto diet.
So I didn't coin this, but I heard it somewhere and it stuck with me. Ketosis is a state. How you get there is up to you. Fasting is the best way for me. Plant-based is what I chose to do during my period of healing. Brad are now using Dr. Sophia Clemens' Paleolithic ketogenic diet. There's tons of options.
Yeah. I mean, all that a keto diet means is extremely low carbs and bumping up your fat. I mean, in a moderate amount of protein, right? And that can be from any source, like,
Yep.
so yeah.
Totally agree. It just means you're burning fat as fuels. That's it.
Yeah. In fact, Maggie, the diet that she had when she was healing, that first year of healing, was definitely vegetarian. Maybe did you have any fish?
I had fish. We had on the weekends. Fish tends to increase my blood sugar. I did not trust the animal meat while we were living in Hong Kong, so we didn't eat any ruminants or mammals or poultry. But I loved eggs on the weekends, and fatty fish was what I ate then. So it was very strongly plant-based, like 5 to 10% of calories from animal sources. But again, now we're this week we're 100% of calories from animal sources.
So I was going to ask. That was news to me because last time we talked, you said you were still kind of more plant based, and again, we all agreed. Like we kind of promote carnivore diets, but that's not what I'm screaming at people on the corner to do all the time. People can choose whatever they like, and so you have had at least a little bit of an evolution, or at least enough to try something. Well, the paleo medicina that you referenced, they do, from what I understand, very fat heavy carnivore diets and elimination of all plants. Is that what you are on right now?
Just temporarily. So Dr. Sophia Clemens, who's also speaking at the summit, has amazing research on some of the things she's done with cancer. First of all, she is the longest surviving GBM patient ever in the books. She treats autoimmune conditions. When I found out that she treated GI congestions primarily, and that sometimes you can see results in just a month or so, that's when I was willing to try it. And honestly, Casey, I'm not going to lie, I was born and raised vegetarian. This whole idea of eating, 60, 70% as my calories from just pure fat has not been fun for me. We fasted 3 out of the 7 days. But I do believe, like, there's no question she's convinced me that this is a traditional human diet, right? This is what our ancestors were eating for 500,000 years before the development of agriculture, dairy, all of that. So I do believe it'll help my intestinal permeability, and definitely willing to give it a try. And I have seen results even in the week. So there are a lot of benefits if it's, again, there's something for everybody.
Were you, Maggie, I feel like I was kind of surprised. I thought by just switching to like 100% meat-based diet, I thought there was going to be ramifications of that, right? I thought my body was going to feel weird, or things were going to, be funky. We did have one small thing, which was
oxalate dumping. For somebody with poor or intestinal permeability like me, with a history of eating just all the vegetables constantly nonstop, we
both had that, which, okay, so that's one thing that happened. And so like kind of achy around the kidney area. But I kind of thought like my stomach was going to be churning, or there would just be something that was, like just I wasn't feeling well. But besides this one little achiness, I'm actually surprised at just how easy it was to transition from one kind of ketogenic diet to another. My body just seems to have not missed a beat, which is really, I don't know, I'm just surprised.
My body misses carrots.
I have so much respect for even trying to go down that route. It would be very hard to eat a certain way, believe a certain way, think that what you're doing is the very best thing for your health, to just try something. I have tons of respect for that. One thing that I notice with a lot of women who end up coming in this direction is, like, in the beginning, it's fish, it's a few eggs, maybe just egg whites, maybe some chicken, no red meat. And then it's like, maybe a little bit of pork, and then maybe it is a little bit of red meat, and it's like, texture sucks, I don't really like it, and then it's actually a little bit better, and then it's a little better, and then it's like, women that I notice going down this direction, like steak, I want a ribeye. It all, like, the taste buds change. Have you noticed any of that so far?
Paleo Medicina recommends starting with just 4-legged animals, especially beef. So for this first week, it's just beef and salt. We introduced eggs yesterday and the fish for the first time, but I'm not to a taste bud adjusting period now. In fact, the ribeye we tried to eat a couple days ago, it just actually fell out of my mouth. I'll get there.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of at the ground beef and brisket.
Yeah, I'm okay with, like,
just kind of like little tiny pieces that she's not having to chew a big chunk. I
But
think.
how crazy how our taste buds got here over just our lifespan. When you're a baby, you don't want to eat vegetables. Like children
right.
know that there's something wrong with vegetables, and we just
Yeah.
condition ourselves over a lifetime to,
Yep.
I love spinach now.
I mean, and
Yeah.
not to equate humans to dogs, but we do find it hilarious that, like, since we've been on this diet for a week, our dog is freaking out because we're just so many
He
meat smells coming out of
loves
the kitchen. Like, we're just
That's
like,
amazing.
he's just drooling all over the house, like all day long. And we're
This
just
is
like,
great.
yeah. So there's just, I mean, something going on in his brain that it's like, this is awesome, whatever you guys are doing. Yeah. So
It's funny, but dogs have the most similar digestive system to humans than any other animal because we've evolved with them. We made dogs. There weren't dogs 30,000 years ago. We made them, and so their digestive system is very similar to ours. So I'm sure dog is
interesting.
pretty happy with the same diet. That sounds great.
We just briefly, we actually saw a presentation that was comparing human, intestinal tracts to hyenas, saying that was extremely similar, which is like a scavenger animal that kind of eats everything. And that's kind of what got me there. I was like, all right, if like we were designed to kind of eat everything, but let's do it.
Up to possibly rotting meat because our stomach pH is so strong.
All right.
Yeah. Well, so interesting. So I want to talk about the reception of your movie so far, and I want to cue this up by a story. Brad, I told you this story. Maggie, I don't know if you've heard this story, but I was at the Symposium for Metabolic Health. I'm calling Bethany, and I just told her, like, I've been here for half a day. It's weird to me that I've been in this world for so long that people recognize me, podcast guests that I've had, they recognize me. And then I've had a few strangers come up to me and say, hey, I watched your episode or whatever. Like, that's a little weird for me. It's not why I do this, but it's kind of cool. I hang up the phone, and standing right next to me is a couple. I think they were in their 60s. And they said, hey, Casey, I just want to tell you, my husband here has just been diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. We are here because we saw your interview with Brad and Maggie Jones. It's like the first video we came across. We watched it. We're literally in this conference, in this building, because of the work that you guys are doing. And I just have to say, like, this is you guys. I'm so grateful that, on my end, we made a platform that people can find this stuff, but it's your message that's getting out there and people are finding it and it's helping people. I was blown away. I wish I would have grabbed the name of the couple. We ended up introducing, Brad introduced them to Dr. Brian Lenskis, so now they've got some, care for where they're living. So amazing. And again, I'm so overwhelmed. I walk into the bathroom. There's nobody in there. I leave a voice note for Bethany, and I just say, like, it just happened. Like, somebody just came up to me and said they found my content. I can't believe this. And as I'm doing that, people are starting to walk into the bathroom. So this is getting awkward. I'm making this voice note. So I walk into the back bathroom, close the door in the stall, finish my note. I go to open up the stall, phone on and in hand like this. And I open the door. And as I'm doing that, somebody's pulling the door open. It's Gary Taubes. Gary freaking Taubes is standing outside the stall. I look at him like startled. He looks at me, he looks at my phone that's open, and he goes, I won't ask. I was just like, have a good day, Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
to be completely, this is the reason, if you have ever thought about going to one of these metabolic health conferences, that you should go. I feel like I get about 100% more conference when you're there in person. You get everything that happens on screen that you get if you were like remotely viewing this, but then you get like twice, you get to get that again and just conversations and interactions with people on the floor.
Gary Taubes in the bathroom. Like,
yeah. I mean, if you want to hang out with Gary Taubes and Casey Ruff in the bathroom, you got to go to a conference.
You got to go to a conference for sure. So funny.
Wow. Casey, and it's so true. What you are doing is as important as anything. Like, we are just reporters also. It's all of us trying to get the word out of these incredible researchers and the research that's been done. And we're going to do it no matter how difficult it is. It's getting out there.
Yeah. So to your point, this is the first conference that we also had people come up to us. That couple that you mentioned came up to us, and, so touching, so heartwarming to just know that we are making a difference, and that and the word is getting out there, and they're super excited about how things are progressing, and just looking, they're just to see people just be hopeful about the point where they're at with the cancer diagnosis. That's what you want. We had a few conversations like that weekend about just like, how damaging is it to hear from your doctor that you have 8 months to live? Like, just, like that just kind of that has to be just like devastating. Right. So
Everyone, I try to tell people, yes, listen to your doctor, but you don't have to listen to them when they tell you you have a couple months to live.
I love
That's
that.
not the time to
Yeah.
listen.
yeah.
I love that. If nothing else, it gives you something that's actionable. You have control. You can try this. You don't have to do this, but if you don't want to take all these treatments laying down, like there's something empowering about the fact that you can try this. This will give you something to do. So I'm wondering, now that you've been to a few of these conferences, what has the reception been like inside of the low carbohydrate space in particular?
Let me take that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been fantastic. Actually, we've screened the film, like, and it just depends on the conference, right? Sometimes we do a presentation and show clips from the film and explain the metabolic theory of cancer.
Episode.
I'm sorry, yes, that episode. And sometimes we actually screen the entire episode, that episode one, or but no matter what we do, the reception has been fantastic. And just sort of tangential as that, I know you didn't ask about the film festival circuit, but we have been out on the film festival circuit with episode one. It's won over 70 awards.
75.
75 awards right
Wow.
now. And so that is extremely just sort of gratifying, because these are people that, I'm sure there's some people that have connections to cancer, but these are people I expect kind of like the people in the low carb community to like embrace it and understand it. These are people that aren't from that community, right? These are just, more average people on the
It's
street.
about the production value, though. Brad is a filmmaker. He's a brilliant filmmaker. So it looks great. And episode one tells history of science. It's got Nazis. It's fascinating. And it explains about fermentation and respiration, and it weaves these two together. But it's a great story in addition to a scientific look at cancer metabolism, which is why we
Yeah.
think it's so great.
Yeah.
If you are diagnosed, you can just throw it on and watch it and still be
Yeah.
engaged.
Yeah, it's basically like a Netflix documentary. It's not very dry, right? We wanted it to be watchable and to a little degree entertaining, right? We wanted you to sort of understand what was happening, but just not like taking a science class,
Yeah.
So
Right. No,
Although-
it is. Go ahead.
Oh, Tom Seyfried and now I think Dom D'Agostino have said they'd like to use it in their classes.
two
to help
two
keep these
university
principles.
professors
Wow.
have asked us about getting it. I think Dom is going to use it this fall, and then Tom we're just talking to, hopefully he uses it soon, but he's definitely expressed an interest. So
That's
Yeah.
wow. That's amazing. It's so cool to hear that those names, huge names, are wanting to promote that as well with their students. And it
Yeah.
is a compelling story. Like it was an idea from a scientist that was Jewish, that was so important to Nazi Germany, that they kept him alive in Germany during World War II. Like that's how important this was. This wasn't like we didn't discover this last year. Like this is an old idea that kind of got squashed down. So it is a compelling story.
Yeah.
I'm glad
And it
you go ahead.
Oh, it helps you understand why you haven't heard of this, because this is the kind of question I
Yeah.
get from so many people who know of my success is why haven't I ever heard of it? My doctor
Yeah.
never told me. And you see the history of like, well, he wasn't well received after World War II,
Yeah.
having stayed in Nazi Germany. We had
Yeah.
DNA coming out.
Him and then by sort of association, his theory became politically radioactive after World War II, where people
Yeah.
just didn't want to be associated with him or the theory. And in conjunction with that, around the same time, was the discovery of the structure of DNA. And so a lot of scientists that might have gone down this path of studying the metabolism of cancer instead, went towards this genetic theory of cancer, which, by the way, people say that if you go to medical school today, it's taught that genes cause cancer. That's still a theory.
Yep.
They've been trying to prove it for 70 plus years. It's still not a proven theory. But yet it's still sort of referred to and taught like it is, gospel truth. It's just not
Yep.
yet.
Yep.
So,
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad you contrasted the difference between the low carb conferences and the film festivals and the reception on each. That was definitely something I was going to ask you. Now, this last one, the Symposium for Metabolic Health, and the other one, like you guys do your presentation. It was Thursday this time, which I couldn't come in on Thursday, so I had to miss it. I had to watch the recording instead. But okay, you present on Thursday. You're in San Diego. There was a bit of a rainstorm that it was a former hurricane we had to deal with, but you guys are cool. Like you're on vacation, somewhere warm. Like go to the beach, go hang out. But yet I see you guys at the conferences sticking around, listening to these other presenters. So I'm wondering what the experience has been like to be in the low carbohydrate space like, what other things are you surprised that you've learned? Like, if you learn more about like cholesterol or like mental health or like some of these other things that maybe you weren't pursuing in the beginning of your path, but just kind of end up, you know, being in your field of
Yeah.
consciousness.
Yeah. I have there's two sort of thoughts on this. The first one is that if someone invites me to a conference, I'm thinking that people that are going to that conference might want to interact with us. And so we have made it a point, and we have seen a few other people that do this. And so we're kind of following in their footsteps, which is this idea that I will be around on the floor at a conference from kickoff to the end if I can, because I feel like that's the idea, right? It's like you're coming to a conference to be able to interact with these people, to meet them, to ask them questions, right? If the conference is just like the person coming and speaking for an hour and then like leaving, it's like, well, then you're not getting anything extra by being at the conference. And so I just feel like I owe it to both the people that are coming to the conference and the people that are putting on the conference to just be there. And then the second thing is that we're always trying to expand our knowledge base, right? So this is like the best place to do it, quite honestly, because there's so much stuff out there that's evolving. Of course, I have a few people that I follow, and Maggie has a few people that she follows. But this gets people on your radar that are sort of outside your normal following, right? So I mean, you might see a presentation that you know about a subject that you just didn't know about, and then you're like, you know what, I should follow this person. I think that they've got like some interesting things that they're talking about. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head at the moment, like an exact example of this, but I mean, there's definitely conferences we've been at. I've heard someone talk and I'm taking notes down, and then I get home and I research it, and it's made its way into the documentary, right? So,
Cool.
there's just it's just a great place to gain knowledge and to learn about new people, that because we need to broaden our perspective a little bit, and like find new ways of talking. And
Yeah.
it's always amazing to me when you have like a big panel at like one of these conferences, people generally get along, right? Even if they don't agree on stuff, it's like we're still like kind of in this together. We're all trying to like help and improve lives and make the world a better place. So
I think
Yeah.
that's what's so different about our community is that we are open to the idea of science evolving, that we don't know everything. And I think that's the worst thing with science right now, is that people like to pretend that in the last 70 years we figured out everything there is to know, and you
That's right.
can't have any new ideas that don't build on what is honestly not good science right now.
Yep. Yep,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
It would just be interesting to, experience what you guys are experiencing, like listening to somebody like Dave Feldman, who's making a presentation about cholesterol that is so far advanced, and like you can hear a pin drop in the room. Like everybody is so alert. Everybody's low carb and keto anyway, so their mental clarity is awesome. And you're right when you mentioned earlier, like the energy of that type of a conference is great. This is not all sunshine and rainbows, though. There must be some pushback that you've experienced. Can you talk? Would you like to comment about any like resistance, pushback? Why not on Netflix right now, for example? Like what have you guys experienced?
Well, the Netflix question will be some time away. We're a
Okay,
4 series or episodes. We're almost done with
Yeah.
episode 2, so got to wait for some of that.
cool.
But and we're in the festival and awards circuit right now. We're actually having the world premiere next month that I know in September that I know we're going to talk about. But even just trying to publicize some of our conferences, our awards, are the premiere is the big one thing I'm trying to get out to people. We're offering it for any donation, including free, because we just want people to see it. And things like this, Netflix not approving incredibly baseline ads. I have Dr. Seyfried
You
saying,
mean Facebook?
I'm sorry, saying that, there's an misunderstanding of there's a misunderstanding of the theory that underlies the treatment of this disease. That was it. That was the quote. And it was rejected for violating their standards. It's like, we
Wow.
can't pretend that we understand everything about cancer treatment because we have all these people dying. It's the second leading cause of death right now. And so there are little things like that. And then some of the comments that we get can be aggressive.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, comments are just going to be the loose cannons out there. And of course,
Trolls.
like, yeah, uh, there's certainly people that, have gone through like a cancer, involved in their life, and they just end up with a lot of resentment. And so we totally understand that. But what I was going to say is that you kind of mentioned earlier, like about this, going to the Amazon and licking frogs, right? There's a lot of that stuff out there. So, I mean, we can understand where it's like there's, we're trying to like rein that in, right? Like Facebook and, Instagram and other social media platforms are trying to sort of like, control that type of, ad from getting out there. That's the snake oil salesman.
Yeah.
And what's kind of getting caught in this big dragnet is people who are like us, who are sort of talking about science, or I mean, I wouldn't call us fringe exactly, but we're just talking about things that aren't proven yet, right? And it's like, well, if you're going to talk about things that aren't proven yet, like, that shouldn't be
But isn't it proven that we don't fully understand the underlying
well,
cause of this disease?
well, I mean, yeah, I suppose that's a good way to think about it. Yeah, we don't know. But even if even if you don't know that, it just seems like there should be room for a civilized discussion, and be able to, advertise that, hey, we're going to have a civilized discussion on this. And but yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
The
That's why
last one.
we're very, very much grassroots at this point, right? It's
Yeah.
like, so it's, and that makes actually super important that if you hear us and please help spread the word, right? Like, please talk to your family members, friends, colleagues, right? That's the only way right now that really things are spreading. So,
And I'm not judging.
and people like you, Casey.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we all have a role, like you guys said. Let's talk about this premiere that you guys have this month. Pretty cool, September. What's going on? When's the date? And what can people plan on?
So it's a limited world premiere right now because we don't have all the episodes done, like I mentioned, but we don't want people to have to wait to see them. So episode 1 is the one that's complete, that's been in festivals and awards. It's going to be available from September 20 through the 30th. And you can sign up right now for a donation of any amount, like I mentioned, and you'll not only be able to see that episode 1, but it's going to be almost an hour of additional content from episode 2 and subsequent episodes. And then you'll be notified as each one comes out so that you're in the loop. Again, we don't want anybody to have to wait for this. And then that is happening in conjunction with a summit, because the series really explains the scientific why of the metabolic theory, but people want to know about the how. And Brad and I are not qualified to tell you the how. And it's also so constantly changing, like this cutting edge of science. And so we have this online summit, and I know we were talking about the benefits of an in-person summit, but we tried to capture all of them in what's online. The speakers are going to be hanging out, actually talking through posts. There's going to be a lot of live question and answer sessions where you can ask questions of Thomas Seyfried. Just check out the website. It's cancerevolution.events. And we have this one actually has a cost associated with it, unlike just the premiere, because it's incredibly expensive to put on. But we can give 20% off using coupon code Boundless20 for listeners of this show. And I'm just so ridiculously excited about it. Take a look at our list of speakers. I mean, just the keynotes are Dr. Thomas Seyfried, Dr. Bruce Lipton is coming on, Michael Lee. We have a huge representation of different dietary speakers. I mentioned Sophia Clemens, but we also have somebody like Robert Lee. We have Dr. Matthew Vanderheiden from MIT talking about the real conventional perspective on this.
I was going to say the reason that this came about too was that we really didn't feel like there's a few metabolic health conferences out there, and typically they kind of have like a cancer day, or like sort of group maybe 3 or 4 cancer speakers together in a row, but we really didn't feel like the cancer community was being served. And also the conferences, they're usually continuing education conferences, so they're usually the presentations can be a little bit technical, right? So if you're a cancer patient and you go to a metabolic health conference, depending on which one you go to, it might kind of just be gobbledygook to you, right? And it might not make a lot of sense. So we even though we have some of the same speakers at this conference, we specifically ask them to gear their presentations towards the layman, towards cancer patients and their caregivers. So it should be a very different type of experience if you've tried to like watch things online and they're extremely scientific.
Well, it's also intended for some practitioners looking to learn more. And there are a couple of more medical presentations, but it spans the entire spectrum because we have almost 40 people speaking or on the panels.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
over. I think there'll be over 40 hours of conversations
Wow.
when it's all
Wow.
done. Yeah.
That's amazing. So cool that you guys put this together. And I think that's a great way to approach it because anybody, whether they're a patient, whether they're a provider, you can go deeper on this stuff. Like once you find some of these people, you can go a little bit further if you want to get more technical. That stuff is out there. You'll at least know who to follow. But yeah, to make it so understandable at the baseline level, I think is a great place to start and to get this conversation started because you're right. Like it's so important. The numbers that you cited earlier, Maggie, are staggering that we're losing so many people still and just don't seem to be making any progress in this terrible disease and all its modifications. It sucks. So the work you guys are doing is absolutely wonderful. It's such a pleasure to chat with you guys. I freaking love you guys. I love your work. It's so awesome and amazing. Tell our listeners where they can go to find you, connect with you and your work, and where one more time they can go to sign up for the premiere and also for the summit.
I'll start with that one, Cancer Evolution with 1R.events. And from there, you can just click on the page on the homepage or the button on the homepage, and you'll be able to either sign up for just a premiere. You can even choose pay what you can if you can't do any of the recommended amounts. And then there's a little toggle if you want to join the summit.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then coupon code Boundless20.
Boundless20. Yeah.
Okay. Is that case sensitive at all?
It's all caps.
All caps. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And if you want to know more about the film and actually, what each episode, like a little synopsis of each episode, or a little bit more about, Maggie and I's story and how we, if this wasn't enough, you can go to cancerevolution.film. And again, that's Cancer Evolution has 1R. So it looks like Cancer Evolution .film. And we on that page, you can find all of our socials. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on X, we're on YouTube. So in fact, YouTube, I think, is a great place to go. Cancer Evolution Doc is our YouTube handle, because there you can see what really is the core of what we're doing. You can see clips and see the actual experts speaking.
Awesome. Yeah, we will link all of that in the notes. What are we supposed to call? So it's not Twitter anymore. What are we supposed to call your posts on X? Is it still tweets? Do we change that?
Posts, I read.
Posts. Okay.
Yeah.
Tweets is better. Tweets is way better. I'm not getting on the X train.
Yeah.
Early.
I made an X. I did an X.
Yeah, right.
I did
Right,
that sounds.
exactly.
Yeah,
that sounds
exactly.
Exactly. Well, you guys are awesome. We'll link to all that in the show notes. And thank you so very much for coming on our show again today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you,
Casey,
everyone.
you are so welcome. Thank you so much for having us.
Can't wait to see you again.
Such an honor. We'll see each other soon. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.